And I have a hard time with people. When I had enough, I locked the door to my room and went to sleep. In the summer of 1946, Georgia O'Keeffe went through something that no one talks about. She was at the top of her game and made history when she was the first woman to be shown alone at the Museum of Modern Art. Then her whole world fell apart. She wasn't there for 10 days. The strange part is here. It was not reported. The press, the art world, and even her family didn't say anything. What could make everyone agree to hide the fact that she died? The answer tells the darkest art history secret in the United States. She was born in a small farmhouse in Sun Prairie, Wisconsin, on November 15, 1887. She was the second of 7 children in a dairy farming family that worked hard. They seemed to have a simple life, but her family's history was quite interesting. Before coming to the United States in 1848, her grandpa, George Victor Toto, was a Hungarian count. But that title didn't protect them from hard times. The family had a hard time with money. Francis, her father, failed at business more than once. And by the time Georgia was a teen, life on the farm had turned into a hard fight to stay alive. They used to have a good life, but now they were poor, and that change shaped her deeply. She learned very young that she should never count on other people, and that lesson followed her all through her life. Gail's world was the big, quiet land around Sun Prairie. Even though it was lonely, big, and quiet all the time, she thought the grassland had a magic to it. Some people may have felt stuck, but she paid close attention to the details that most people didn't. The wind moving through the grass, the shape of blooms, and the curve of dried bones all spoke to her. That's not all she saw. She saw designs, patterns, and shapes that were hidden. Ida, her mother, was cold and classy even though they lived in a rough area. She had the same quiet, proud air as she grew up. Being alone and seeing beautiful things shaped her into the artist she would become. The family had to leave Wisconsin in 1902 because her father's last business failed. That's when they moved to Williamsburg, Virginia. There, he tried to build houses out of concrete blocks, but the plan failed again. People around the O'Keeffe family saw their once respected family fall apart as they lost a lot of money. Georgia's mom had bronchitis and spent most of her time in bed. Georgia wanted to be in charge of her own life because it hurt her to see her family fall apart and she felt powerless and ashamed. She didn't want to depend on anyone for anything, not love, money, or fame. Georgia started taking watercolor drawing lessons from a nearby artist named Sarah Mann when she was only 10 years old. She brought her sisters Ida and Anita to the lessons too. Mann gave his students art books that taught them to copy easy shapes and then work harder as they went along. Georgia did what she was told, but she really didn't want to copy other people. She didn't want to paint like everyone else, even though she was young. She wished to create something fresh and unique. One of her first paintings, of small cherry blossoms, had the focused, close-up look that would make her famous later on. Georgia had already started to cross the lines even though her teacher told her to stay in them. For the next few years, Georgia lived in Chicago and went to the School of the Art Institute. To save money, she lived with her aunts and uncle. Her teacher, John Vanderpoel, was one of the few people she ever really looked up to. She worked hard and got to the top of her class. To get better at painting skulls, she even learned anatomy by taking them apart. But in 1906, just 1 year later, something terrible happened. Typhoid fever spread to Georgia. She lost all of her strength and even had hair fall out because she was so sick. She had to drop out of school and go home. It's been over a year since she painted. Still, something inside her changed during that long time of making better. She became quieter and more driven to make something that really mattered when she thought about dying. She felt strong enough to start over in 1907 and move to New York to go to school at the Art Students League. It was different with the teachers there. They encouraged being creative. William Merritt Chase showed her how to use a brush to make big lines. She also won an award in 1908 for a picture of a rabbit and a copper pot. She got a free pass to a summer school at Lake George because of it. She also began going to modern art spaces, such as Stieglitz's 291, to see new works that made her feel something. But disaster struck again that same year. Her father lost all of his money, and her mother's health got worse. Georgia didn't have a choice. She quit being an artist and became a business artist in Chicago. It was her job to draw ads for fabric and lace. She did it quickly and well, but it didn't feel full. She hated the work so much that she burned most of the pictures afterward. She said it made her sick to smell turpentine. She didn't paint at all for almost 4 years. One of the worst times of her life was that quiet. She got sick again in 1910. This time it was measles, and it made her eyes hurt. That fear was scary for an artist. She moved in with her family in Charlottesville. She started drawing with chalk while she was getting better. She had never done those things before. They were general. They didn't come from a book or her teacher, they came from her own thoughts and feelings. That's when her art really changed, and it was just the start. She went back to her old school, Chatham Episcopal Institute, in 1911, but this time she was a teacher. She broke the rules. Instead of copying still items, she had them draw real people. Kids' parents were shocked. People told Georgia it wasn't right for her, but she didn't care. She believed in honest communication, not following old rules. It was a controversy that she taught. But it also showed she was ready to take charge. Everything began to change in 1915. She made a set of charcoal drawings while she was teaching at Columbia College in South Carolina. These drawings were based on new design ideas she had learned in the summer. At the time, these pieces were bold and didn't look like anything else. She gave them to her friend Anita Politzer, who in early 1916 showed them to Alfred Stieglitz. He was shocked. He said he had no words to describe how they made him feel. She was only 28 years old when all of a sudden she became one of the first modernist artists in the United States. Then there was the incident that would always link her name to his. Stieglitz was 52 years old and married when she met him. She was only 29 years old. They began to write letters that were thousands of pages long. Their words were secret and full of love. Georgia quit her job as a teacher in Texas in 1918 and moved to New York. She had a studio and Stieglitz paid her rent so she could be an artist full-time. He was married, though. Everyone was shocked by the age difference and the affair. Georgia painted 51 watercolors of Palo Duro Canyon while she was in Texas from 1916 to 1918. A lot of people thought the deep reds and strong shapes looked like women. Some people said they were sexual. It took her miles to paint the canyon, which was 800 feet deep and full of raw power. No one else had ever done that before. The artist stole special number 21 from a museum in 2003 and has never been found. Things got worse in 1918. Millions of people around the world got the Spanish flu, including people in Georgia. Her body hurt. She was not strong. While he was at war, her brother was hit with poison gas and died. She felt very sad. The flag, a painting she made, showed how sad she was. No stars, dark clouds, and a flag that is shaking. She said the flag didn't mean anything to her anymore. She finally decided to move to New York for good because of the sickness and pain. But peace wasn't easy to find even there. Since 1918, Stieglitz has been taking pictures of her. He took more than 300 pictures, and a lot of them were of him naked. They were shown in a gallery in 1921. People saw her hands, chest, and body without any clothes on. Some people were shocked, while others thought it was art. But Georgia later said that the pictures made her feel open, like people saw more of her body than her art. They did help her become famous, but not in the way she had hoped. Atlanta O'Keeffe and Alfred Stieglitz were married on December 11, 1924. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was more of a quiet deal between two people who require each other. It was never easy, though. He was more experienced and well-known in the art world, while she was on the rise quickly. Their strange way of understanding worked at first. But things went wrong in 1928. Dorothy Norman was married and 23 years younger than Georgia when Stieglitz started seeing her. The affair wasn't kept a secret. It was open to everyone. Uncomfortably public. Stieglitz and Dorothy worked together a lot, and Georgia had to watch. GA lost a big job at the same time, a mural for Radio City Music Hall. She was broken inside by that loss and the ongoing shame. By 1933, she had a full-on mental breakdown and went to the hospital. For 2 months, she stayed there. She couldn't paint at all during that time. However, something amazing had happened before that. The art world was shocked by her one-woman show in New York on January 29, 1923. 100 of her works were shown. 500 people came on the first day. She was no longer just another artist. People loved her, but the reviews were weird. Critics didn't say anything about her colors or how she painted. They said she was a woman. Everything became sexual. A few people even said that her works were full of secret meanings. Still, by 1928, she did something that no other American artist at the time had ever done. For $25,000, she sold 6 drawings of calla lilies. That was a lot of money back then. It's worth about $400,000. Some people thought Stieglitz had set up the sale with unknown buyers to make herself more valuable. But the effect was real, whether it was true or not. She had money, power, and freedom now. She was free from having to depend on anyone. At the same time, critics began to say something else in whispers. People said that her drawings of skyscrapers were sexual. It was in 1927 that she painted the Radiator Building in Night, New York. It was tall, smooth, and bright. The painting was done from her 30th floor apartment window in the Shelton Hotel. Some people who didn't like it said it looked like a sign of male power. Gavin said that wasn't true, but it got even more attention. People who work in architecture started to say that buildings were signs of the American spirit. Her work was now part of a bigger talk about life in the 21st century, gender, and goal setting. After that, in 1929, things changed again. She left New York that summer and went west. She had been asked to come. Trip to Taos, New Mexico. The trip changed her a great deal. It seemed like the land would never end. To see the desert, she bought a Ford Model A and learned how to drive. She started to gather animal bones she found in the sand. Back in 1931, she painted a cow head with calico roses on it. She saw beauty in the bones instead of death. But people in the East didn't get it. She didn't care that people thought her new work was weird and scary. Every year, she kept going back to the desert. Then came 1932, the year when everything fell apart. Her Radio City art piece broke. To the point. The canvas came off. The idea didn't work out. And Stieglitz lied to her again. He let someone else use her gallery space. That was the last blow. Her body changed. Her heart was beating fast. She cried all the time. She had too many headaches to handle. In 1933, she went to the hospital and checked herself in. The doctors told her she had psychoneurosis, which means she was very depressed and her body couldn't handle it any longer. It's been over a year since she painted. The worst part of her life was that silence. Something else took place during this bad time. Businesses started to copy her style. Ads began to use her famous close-up flower pictures. It wasn't okay with her. It was a bold crime. She fought back even though she was still getting better. They were taken to court. It wasn't about the cash. Her only goal was to keep her art safe. She won. It wasn't much money, but the message was very important. The court agreed that someone else couldn't take her unique style. Other artists got stronger because of this case, and it made her even more motivated to work alone. She found Ghost Ranch, a huge desert place in New Mexico, in 1934. In love with it, she tried for years to buy a small clay house there. In 1940, she finally did. She loved how simple and quiet the house was. She put in a big window so the desert would always be visible. She called the strange area of Black Hills nearby, the Black Place. From far away, it looked like stone waves that were almost like elephant faces. She went to the Black Place many times between 1936 and 1949. Coloring it with a lot of anger. 6 large paintings, a pastel, and 9 sketches were all done by her in just 2 years, 1944 and 1945. During that time, she was at her most artistic. By 1940, she had painted more than 200 scenes of New Mexico, but her best was a certain mountain. It stood on its own and was flat on top. The name of it was Cerro Pedernal. It was her own rock, she said. She once said, "God told me I could have it if I painted it enough." People in the area began calling it O'Keeffe's Mountain over time. She painted it over and over, and most of the time she put it behind flowers or bones. But she was hiding things. She did not want other people to copy her methods. She painted by herself. No guests or other things to do. She burned paintings that didn't turn out well. She didn't want anyone to ever see how bad she was. After being caught plagiarizing in 1933, she learned to protect her work with all her might. Georgia O'Keeffe was scared in 1945. She had written letters to Alfred Stieglitz for 30 years, the man she loved. Those letters were almost made public. It wasn't just sweet notes. They were honest, enthusiastic, and very close to home. It was possible for some lines to change how everyone saw her just by reading them. In her writing, she said things like, "My body is just crazy with wanting you." When coming from a woman in her position, that kind of talk could have destroyed everything she had worked for. People had always looked down on her. Some people have already made her art seem sexual. Now, what she said was going to be used against her too. She was aware that male artists didn't have to deal with this kind of attention. Their personal lives were kept secret, but she wasn't safe in the same way. It was even worse because Alfred had written things too. He had taken many pictures of her naked. Even though his letters showed how obsessed he was, no one threatened to print his words. Only hers were threatened. She then did something terrible. A lot of letters were burned. She wanted to be in charge of her life, even if it meant that parts of her story would be lost forever. She thought it was the only way to keep herself safe. In May 1946, the very next year, something very important took place. It was the first time in history that a woman had her own show at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. 100 of her works were shown. It should have been her best time ever. But bad things happened just 2 months after the show started. Alfred had a stroke and died quickly on July 13, 1946. She was broken up. She didn't say much to the press. She couldn't even bring herself to talk about the show. 3 of her works were also stolen from the show. They were never found. There was meant to be a party to honor all that she had done. She didn't feel like her world was coming together. Georgia packed up her things and went to Obiquio, New Mexico, for good in 1950. No matter how much she wanted peace, she pushed herself even more. Her picture was so big that it was 24 feet wide in 1965. It was named Sky Above Clouds 4. She worked on it every day, beginning at 6 a.m. and working late into the night. It wasn't even warm in the shed where she worked, and she was always afraid a rattlesnake would hide under the canvas while she worked. She didn't stop, though. In the end, that picture sold for a price that broke all records. She was called one of the most important American artists still alive. But as success came, so did new problems. In the 1980s, fake paintings of Georgia O'Keeffe began to show up in art shops. Some were bought and sold for hundreds of thousands of dollars before experts found out they were fakes. It got so bad that Georgia had to step in and fix it herself. She herself looked at the drawings and told people which ones were real. Some of the fans were mad. They spent a lot of money on fakes. Then came lawsuits. People brought up her name in court. Her name got mixed up with the fakes, even though she had nothing to do with them. In 1959, one of the stranger things ever took place. Georgia, who is now 72 years old, was traveling through Europe. In her bags, she didn't have any fancy clothes or art tools. She packed real bones instead, like cow skulls, horse bones, and even sheep skulls. She told everyone that they were the most important art supplies for her. When French customs officers at Charles de Gaulle Airport looked through her bag, they thought they saw dead bodies. They stopped her right away. Georgia lost her cool. In broken French, she yelled at them and grabbed one of the heads like it was a baby. Reporters took pictures of her being led through the airport while she held on to her bones. Over time, people said that she would put those bones in her hotel rooms and talk to them like they were real. Everyone was shocked. Then 1977 came along. The old lady was 90 years old. The Presidential Medal of Freedom, which is the highest civilian award in the United States, was given to her by President Gerald Ford. Everyone thought she was a strong, brave woman who had lived her own life. In a private moment at the White House, she said something that no one thought she would. She told a reporter that she felt bad about one thing. She had never had a child. She said Alfred made her pick. He didn't want kids. He warned her that they would lose their relationship and her art. So she picked art. She said quietly, "I chose wrong," as she stood there with the medal in her hand. She told them something even worse. In the 1920s and 1930s, she had been pregnant 3 times. She had 3 babies, but lost all of them. Alfred didn't make her feel better. He told her that the losses were good things. Those words scared her, she said. She thought about the kids she never had in her dreams. She said she had been hiding toys in her house her whole life and collecting them in secret. No one knew. Everyone thought she wasn't interested in having kids. But the truth was not like that at all. August 1946, Alfred Stieglitz had a stroke. Georgia O'Keeffe quickly flew from New Mexico to New York to be with him. He died on July 13 at the age of 82. She was by his side the whole time. However, what came next shocked everyone. Georgia decided to cremate him, which was a surprise to his family. It was against their customs and made things very tense. She also asked Dorothy Norman, who had been Stieglitz's lover for years, to leave the hospital room right before he died. That moment was strong. It was the end of a long and painful story that had been going on in Georgia since the 1920s. She wasn't going to let anyone else decide how to end her marriage to Stieglitz, even though it had become cold between them. After he died, she was buried in office work. From 1946 to 1949, she worked non-stop to take care of Stieglitz's huge estate. It had over 4,000 works of art and a lot of letters. A lot of them were given to big museums like the Met by her. It wasn't easy, though. His family and other people fought back, asking her about her decisions and saying she was biased towards some works. The records were so long and complicated that she needed help just putting them in order. She didn't want to stay in New York as much as she did during those years. She had to put off painting her own picture while she looked after Stieglitz's memory. By 1949, she could no longer handle the stress. She was really sick, but she didn't talk about it much. Her friends and family said she was mentally and physically worn out. But she never really stopped painting, even while she was getting better. She wouldn't give up her art, so she worked on smaller pieces from her bed. In the same year, she made the choice to leave New York for good and move to New Mexico. It was a very important moment. She was leaving the world that made her famous and going into the desert, which had always drawn her. In the same year, she did something that almost no one thought she would. She threw away a lot of the private pictures Stieglitz had taken of her, especially the ones where she was naked. These pictures used to help her become well known. They showed how much they loved each other and were praised for how beautiful they were. Georgia didn't want to be known as someone's muse, though. She wanted to be in charge of her own picture, so she carefully picked which ones to keep and which ones to burn. They were gone for good after she gave some to museums and Dorothy Norman. Some people say that those prints that were burned are worth a lot of money now. Macular degeneration made her lose her sight in 1968, when she was already in her 80s. In 1971, when she was 84 years old, she could hardly see straight ahead. Georgia refused to stop painting, even though most people thought she would. She kept working, and she hired helpers to help her make big works. They did what she said like an orchestra following a director as she talked about what she saw in her mind. She also used clay because she could touch it. She never lost her ability to be artistic, even when she couldn't see. Even though they were different, her new works were still brave and full of life. Then, in 1973, when she was 86 years old, the art world was shocked by something. One Hamilton, a potter who is 27 years old, came to her door and asked for pottery help. He became more than that, though, very quickly. He helped her out, drove her around, hung out with her, and maybe even more. People talked behind their backs about their romance and called it scandalous. There were 58 years between them. Some people thought it was strange. She thought it was funny. Men artists always have young women, she said. People are shocked if I have a young man. He took care of her, went to Morocco with her, and was there for her the last few years of her life. She left him most of her $70 million fortune, her homes, her art, and most of her money when she died in 1986. In 1976, she wrote an account that shocked people. It was only about 1,000 words long, but it said a lot. She began by saying that it doesn't matter where or how I was born or lived. She didn't think about where she came from, just what she did with her life. For 2 years in a mental hospital in 1932, she barely talked about her marriage or her mental breakdown. The book still sold a lot of copies. She made every page herself because she wanted it to be the only true story of her life. But a lot of people who read it wanted more. In 1978, when she was 90 years old, she went to court. Someone from the bank had paid $5.5 million for 28 paintings that were said to be hers. Some experts started to wonder if they were real, though. Georgia went to court even though she was almost blind. She stood her ground and kept her cool. It was clear from the trial how hard it is to show who made what in the art world. After that, in 1993, there was another case of theft. For a lot of money, a woman was selling fake statues that looked like Georgia's work. Only a few hundred copies were made, but people paid as much as $5,500 for them. In 1984, Georgia's health got so bad that she had to leave the home she loved in Abiquiu and move to Santa Fe. After 38 years of drawing in northern New Mexico, she was 97 years old and couldn't stand being alone any longer. She kept making art even though she was blind by talking out loud about her ideas. Artists worked for her and listened to everything she said. From her memories, she made up dreamy pictures of the desert. He took care of her and made sure her last months were peaceful and full of art. She died in Santa Fe on March 6, 1986. She was 98 years old. Something very interesting happened after she died. She asked that her ashes be spread out on Pedernal Mountain, the flat-topped mountain that she had painted many times. She once said, "God told me I could have it if I painted it enough." Their wish came true. When her ashes were spread out, the wind picked them up and took them across the desert dust, forever joining her with the mountain. Peace didn't last long, though. Her will was the subject of a huge court case. She gave one Hamilton not just 10% of her wealth, but 70% of it, just a few days before she died. Her family was very angry. Hamilton was accused of cheating her by her sister and granddaughter. They said he bought expensive cars and a $2.6 million house for his ex-wife and kids with her money. Things got bad in court. But they made a deal in July 1987. After leaving, Hamilton had $2 million pieces of art and the Ghost Ranch land. Some of the money went to the new Georgia O'Keeffe Foundation.